I wanted to make some YouTube videos actually showing you when I audit a podcast, some of the things I'm looking for. I believe this is going to be way more of a value add than some of the other videos I'd make. So I wanted to start with some of the top shows out there. And today I chose Online Marketing Made Easy by Amy Porterfield. So I'm going to audit it. Now, so you know, she is a guest co-host with Jasmine Star on Jasmine Star show. So there it's kind of like a 2-for-1. And their guest is Faun Weaver, who founded and owns Uncle Nearest Whiskey in Tennessee, and she is one of only 6 Black female billionaires out there. So huge guest, absolute masterclass in guesting. Unfortunately, we're not covering her as much as we are the host today. So let's get into it. And I do have some feedback from the audio side, meaning like I've listened to the episode and I also watched it on YouTube. I'll probably focus a little bit more on the YouTube side. All right, we are going to go ahead and press play here in a second. I have Spotify open. I also have YouTube open. Let me go ahead and share my screen so we can check out what we got going on.
If you go back to the way you were before the world molded you, you'll know where your purpose is.
Okay, I want everyone to hear. You had a bank account that was $1.4 million in the red.
Yes.
What was your first thought?
I was built for this.
Damn.
Okay, so 15 seconds in, you get a glimpse of the guest. You don't know what the guest, who the guest is, what they're about, why they're there. It's always good to start with a fire clip. So that was a good choice for sure. If you don't do that, definitely a value add to just give a preview of what someone could hear. And I think one tactic we definitely like to use is whatever that clip is, put it towards the end or past the halfway point of the podcast so people get a chance to listen up to it. It'll keep them there longer. Let's get back to it.
Amy Porterfield, ex-corporate girl turned CEO of Learned, and you'll both actionable step by.
All right, so maybe about 50 seconds on the actual trailer or explaining what the podcast is about if you're a first-time listener, which is fine, but I'm not sure it's needed.
That I think is really going to help. Checklist is literally what my team and I follow to keep things simple, structured, and moving forward without feeling totally overwhelmed. From choosing your topic to all the web pages /checklist. Now, back to the show. Star. I co-hosted.
Okay, so right now we're about 2 minutes and 30 seconds into it. Anyone who may have started this episode, you know, there's a chance, probably I would say 12 to 15% of them are gone because just because of like the slow ramp up. So we had the preview of the guest, which is fine. Then essentially a trailer, the intro for the podcast, which you don't need it to be more than 15 seconds long. And then you have an ad. So it's about 2:31. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised on Apple Podcast Analytics or on Spotify if there was a pretty decent drop off.
5 episodes for her podcast that I then get to post on as well. Weaver, who has founded and led the guest. Imagine, incredible to be in her
Star show, a place that we talk about business.
So about 4 minutes in, we get to another intro. So Amy gives a background, which I completely get. She wants to let you know, hey, this is not standard if you're a normal listener. And then we get into Jasmine. So let me click out of here. Okay, so now we're on the YouTube side, and I just want to kind of go back and forth a little bit. And don't worry, we're not going to listen to this whole thing. But
if you go back to the way you were before the world molded you, you'll know where your purpose is.
I want everyone to hear. You had a bank account that was $1.4 million in the red.
Yes.
What was your first thought?
I was built for this.
Damn. I'm Amy Porterfield. You simple on that list. A million times.
And teaching how to. Welcome to the Jasmine Star
Ounce of that.
okay, here is a problem in my opinion. So right now they saw a preview of the episode, or at least of the guest, but then they see this. If you are a YouTuber or someone who's consuming the podcast on YouTube, one of two things is going to happen. You're going to fast forward inconveniently to find out where it gets to the actual video, or you might click off. So I would not be surprised if there is a drop off there as well. That's totally normal, but I would have rather seen Amy like on camera, even if she was just like in her pajamas, like, hey, this is an episode when I was, with doing my co-hosting with Jasmine. We had this amazing guest on, whatever it may be. So, a still picture of the cover art, it's just not good. Not what YouTube wants, that's for sure.
It was just incredible to be in her presence.
Tennessee better than Amy until the one Weaver is CEO.
So now we're at a point where they're kind of introducing the guest. They give a little bit of background about the guest. And here's where I think the podcast kind of gets off to a weird start. And this is very common to happen, but let's go ahead and play it and maybe you'll be able to kind of pick it up yourself.
Thing that I have done my homework. I know you're an LA girl. We're going to get into all of that. But as we start the show, I want somebody hearing right now, like, what's in this for me? And if the one thing that people walk away with is like a brand can be built.
Yes.
And a brand can be filled with soul.
Yes.
And a brand can be respectful. And it can be filled with love. And it can be filled with history. All of these things that you've done in iterations of your career. We're going to get to all of that.
Yeah.
But Amy had mentioned something. She's like, there's something about Faun's story where she talks about owning the land.
Oh, yeah.
And we talk about this in the context of like,
Okay. Look, she talked a lot and she's still not done. So she goes on to say, we're going to get to all of that multiple times. But the big thing is, if you go right back here.
Excited.
So one of the things that Amy and I were talking as we prepped the show was this idea of you are a brand builder.
Yes.
Everything that I have done my homework. I know you're an LA girl. We're going to get into all of that. But as we start the show, I want somebody hearing right now, like, what's in this for me?
That's it. That's it. You don't need to say anything else. Just ask the concise question, because if not, then you can end up just kind of going on and on. And Jasmine is an amazing podcast host. I'm just saying, it's like, you got to get the guest in the mix ASAP. ASAP. They are donating their time. Okay. So when you're kind of setting the stage for them, which they probably don't need set if they're someone of this caliber, they're just kind of sitting there. And another mistake people can make is just really kind of glazing them. If you don't know what glazing is, it's just like really talking them up while they're sitting there. And I'm sorry, man, like podcast guests like don't know what to do during that time. It's super awkward and weird. The more you could get them involved, the faster you could get them involved, the better. If you're enjoying what you're watching so far, obviously share it with someone, or you could like it and subscribe. I would absolutely love to continue to show up and provide value to you. So there's a couple of things here.
And if the one up to everybody and you
Made sure that I owned the land.
So we finally got to the guest, and the guest looks fantastic. I will say though, once we get to this wide shot, and I'm just gonna let me go ahead and put the volume down. What you can see here is the guest is, number one, this is pretty blown out. The sun goes in and out. So I completely get the challenges of finding a space, but like this looks pretty clean, but it does get blown out once in a while and it's really harsh. And then you see this light. So they obviously got a hammer in here or a softbox. And in order to compensate for the light outside, you gotta be as bright inside. While they look okay, it goes in and out and it's just a little bit challenging. But the other big thing here is there's this sequence. So Amy's asking a question now. Well, actually, let's talk about Amy. Here we go.
Things physical to buy, but that ownership. Give me some tips for the people listening.
Okay, one thing she does fantastic is for the people listening, she does that multiple times during this episode. But look at the microphone. Okay, this is what the microphone should be like. It should be directly in front of you. I am using just a little stand right here that they could use instead of having this cumbersome boom arm that comes over to her. It's also kind of by the side of her face. And I can almost guarantee her and Jasmine probably just want to be able to use their arms or whatever, and they want the mic kind of out of sight, out of mind. But it's distracting because you can't hear Amy as well. You could definitely hear on the podcast, on the actual episode, it's a little bit echoey. And then the other thing is we're looking basically at a
own their
profile
brand in a
view.
bigger way.
But that's
And
online real estate, right?
So it's basically like a profile view. And let's go back to Amy if we can. Faun absolutely crushes it here. So you can see how it's blown out now. Let me go back to Amy. Well, point is this, look, you want to see both of the guest's eyes, or I'm sorry, both of the host's eyes from the certain angles. So I just think it's really important. So here's an example. Like, I want to be able to see her a little bit more clearly. I would have had the camera a little bit more off to the side to get a kind of a straighter on look. Same thing with Amy. Now, the problem with the positioning here is, this is big, really big to me. There's a sequence where Faun and Jasmine talk a lot, and Jasmine's kind of leading, so to speak. Because of where Amy is sitting, she's really not involved. I'm talking like almost like a 10-minute gap. And Faun is literally looking over at Jasmine. So she almost has her back turned to her. And she's not a normal podcast guest, I'm assuming, because she didn't, have the presence of mind, so to speak, to just make sure she was looking at both hosts. So what you would do in this situation is think in advance of who should sit where. And I would have switched right here. I would have switched Faun and Amy. So that way, if Faun was in this chair, she could see both hosts at all times and never turn her back to someone. Jasmine and Amy, it doesn't necessarily matter if they can't see each other because they are doing the interviewing. So that's just a big one I wanted to mention. So positioning of the guest, and then obviously the camera angles that allow you to see the faces more clearly rather than kind of a profile. So I'm looking at some of my notes, and Faun absolutely is just crushing this podcast. Again, masterclass as a guest. And the host actually exercised a really good amount of restraint, I would say, not necessarily interrupting. But one thing I did want to say is that there's a lot of sound bites that Dawn has, and you just got to obviously be on the lookout for those. If you're a host, and you have a timer around you or something, like, you just literally write down the time that you noticed if you want for some of the social media clips. Obviously, these people have teams, but if you don't have a team, that's something you would definitely do. Okay, so here is a part, it's just host etiquette. Again, like, I absolutely and hugely respect anyone with a podcast and anyone who is doing it at a high level like Jasmine and Amy, but this is just an important tip. And I'm going to show you something that is what I would say did not need to happen. Here we go.
The beginning, at the founding of it.
Okay. Amy, I want you asking another question. Can I hop in real quick?
Yes.
You're up next.
Okay.
What's the story? How do you start this?
Yeah.
Like, talk to us about you being on an airplane.
Yeah. So I was.
Okay, so here is the deal. That's not the only time Jasmine kind of cuts her off. Now, the reason I had a problem with this is because, like I said, there was a point where it was just Jasmine and Faun back and forth. I'm like, dude, Amy's been sitting there, like, there's nothing worse. And I'm certain at how close they are as friends, like, oh, it's no problem. I want her to do her thing. But the thing is, the question doesn't need to be asked, right? Like, it's not necessary. And I'm speaking from experience. I used to do this all the time with my co-host Heather. Sometimes I would just be like, oh, hold on, let me just ask this. Like, no, like, just split it up, and you don't need to do it. And you definitely don't need to do it multiple times. So, I just thought that was just kind of weird. And for Amy, it might have lessened the experience, maybe not. But just as a co-host, it's like, dude, let the other host have their thing. And again, they don't co-host all the time, but it's definitely important and relevant. I'm back on Spotify and I'm looking, and there's a couple ads here. We are at about 33 minutes in, so just about exactly halfway. And I just want to kind of show you something really quick. Here is the beginning of the ads.
That moment forward with a belief that if I can't take me out, neither can you.
Neither can you.
We're at about 33 minutes.
I know you're focused on marketing and selling your digital products, but I know many of you also have physical products, and I want to talk about focus on what you as the entrepreneur sound better. They're more strategic. It is so easy to compare yourself to other people building their businesses online. But the problem is comparison is the thief I want instead of what others have, so that I can live my best and suited to your schedule. All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire. You get 10% off your first.
I don't believe that anybody can harm.
So look, that was me trying to fast forward through it. This 3 minutes where people are the most engaged in a podcast, and it's 3 minutes of essentially ads. And there's actually a couple reviews left about this, and one of them reads, I understand podcasters need ads to support production, but ad breaks inserted in the middle of a guest sentence is maddening and very off-putting. There's a few comments like that. Okay, now look, like, in order to make podcasts happen, I'm a podcaster, I get it, like, you need some ads, but I mean, 3 minutes, think of the amount of things that you wait 3 minutes for. If you are a parent and you ask your kid to come upstairs, I mean, are you going to wait 3 minutes? If you're in the middle of a text conversation and you're going back and forth, and then you ask someone a question, would you wait 3 minutes? Just it sounds ridiculous, but I just believe that it's really challenging in an environment where everything is incredibly distractible and everyone's listening to podcasts for the most part on their mobile device. Okay, yeah, I mean, like, data shows people don't mind podcast ads as much, but don't also set the stage for someone to leave. So 3 minutes, in my opinion, definitely in excess. Real quick, some of the things that I'm covering, we have a ton of free resources that we'll link down below, but there's hosting guides, there's tech guides, there's interview guides. There's a lot of free resources based off all our experiences with all the clients that we've worked with and got millions and millions of downloads. We are here to just serve you in any capacity. So go ahead and check that link down below for our free resource library. So we're definitely past halfway of the episode now. Very good vibes all around. And I would say the guest is absolutely and positively shining. The hosts are doing a fantastic job as well. There's only one thing that kind of came up. Now here's where the podcast gets a little crazy, and I think in a great way. Faun talks extensively about faith being her foundation for her success, for her confidence, for the opportunities she has. And she makes a couple statements here that I believe as a guest just makes you incredibly authentic. But it's the follow-on question from Jasmine that kind of I want to, dig into, and I'll talk to you about it in a second. Here we go.
I am the kind of person that walks into a room and I have my head down. And I'm like, oh, how do I have that
And
story?
still own your own.
This is your own lane.
Yeah.
So you and I are sitting in Shelbyville. You and I are sitting here, and I'm like, it's me. I know this, but I don't have the tools. Do you have a framework? Talk me off that ledge. Like, help me step into the confidence to say, I'm not supposed to be in this room, but I'm gonna own this room.
Well, here.
So the thing here is, and look, this is just how I evaluate things. Faun is so unbelievably clear about her faith and her conviction being responsible for kind of how she is. Jasmine wants a framework. And I don't believe, and this happens a couple other times, and I'll have to find them, but you can't teach it, is what I'm trying to say. So the question in itself is redundant because she gives a very, very similar answer that everything revolves around her faith. So I just think it's important to have that kind of situational awareness to be like, what I'm asking for is probably not going to be delivered because this is different than what I expected. Faun is talking about something higher than many of us might believe or any of those things. It's not something that you can read. It is literally in her DNA and in her faith. So I just thought it was important to bring it up. Like, you can't get a framework for it. And she ended up repeating herself anyway. Without me having to show you Spotify, there's a couple more ads by Amy. It takes another couple minutes. That's with about 10 minutes left. So if you are a listener at that point, you're probably super forgiving about it. But yeah, I mean, it lasted another couple minutes. So it's quite a bit of time to be on an ad. Okay, so now we're at a point later in the episode. Overall, fantastic episode, but we're at a point where Jasmine wants to kind of do a game based off something Faun said, and she wants to do it for the listeners, and she wants to just do these kind of hypotheticals. Let me play a little bit of it for you, and then I got to tell you why this was a big, big mistake.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Yes.
So
Go.
So we want 3 things that somebody can do.
Yes.
Now our power play is speaking to our listeners. Like we know. So what she did was scarcity marketing. So Amy, we're gonna play a game for the listener.
Okay.
How do we apply scarcity marketing for success coach? So that's like us taking this big one to incite scarcity.
You want to incite scarcity. So what?
Basically what happened is there's so much momentum and it's just kind of like the wind is taken out of the sails. And the reason I say that is because Faun was absolutely dominating as a guest. The hosts are fantastic. Amy and Jasmine are fantastic, but it's like, dude, the guests, again, they donated their time. And by you saying, I want to make sure our listeners get XYZ, it's almost like you're discrediting the fact that the guest already has ridiculously brought value up until this point. Meaning this, I would definitely do something along those lines as well if the guest did not absolutely crush it, if I felt like they were unclear, if I felt like they only did a decent job and we had to carry them as hosts. This is just you wanting to make sure that you do something that you planned to do. Her laptop's out, she's referencing her stuff, and I get it. I totally get it. Like, she does care about her listeners, but that's undermining the guest. inadvertently. Okay, that's undermining the guests and everything that they provided so far. Not to mention, as they're sifting through what this game is supposed to be about, she's basically quiet with a couple lines here and there. You never want to put the guests in a situation where they're just kind of sitting there. It's all about them. And I just want to kind of show you again, like it just derails. It derails. So let me go ahead and share. Okay. And I just want to show you, look, it derails it quite a bit. Here we go.
Things that we did. The other key thing.
Hold on, is that part of the earned media? Because we could save that for the third.
Yes and no. So the other piece is when I came into the industry, everyone said nobody cares about awards in the spirits industry.
Let's say for the third one. Let's say okay. Okay. All right. So then this one was earned media. You decided to flip the current.
Okay, again, if I were her, I would probably be doing the same thing. But when you're in my shoes and you're evaluating auditing, you could see it's disruptive. Faun knows what the heck's going on and what she needs to do and how she's supposed to serve. But it's kind of like, okay, hold on, you want me to do what? And like now it's like, you want me to play your game? Like, just ask me questions. And again, no one would ever, I promise you at the end of this, they were probably all thought it went super fine and great. And it did overall. But dude, don't push your agenda. So the rest of the podcast wraps up. Everyone's in good spirits, pun intended on that. Jasmine does a great recap, and that just brings me to, and because I kind of chose Amy because I know her a little bit better and my wife is a huge fan of hers, I went down here to just kind of check things out. So 31,000 subscribers, 32 essentially, and 328 views for a top 50 podcast. Like something doesn't make sense there. I'm not exactly sure what to say, but here is what I can tell you. If you go down here, you look at the podcast and 745 episodes. Now, I obviously have looked here before. There's a lot of these, and we'll just do this one, for example. That there's no video. I know what this is, and this is using your RSS feed for your podcast for YouTube. Yes, YouTube is going to put it on there, but if it doesn't have a video, YouTube is going to put the cover art, and that's all that's going to display. And if that's all that's going to display, your average viewer duration or your viewership, like retention, it's going to absolutely positively tank. So now I can't tell. Now they might
Partner around.
They may have thrown in the audiogram, but you now essentially have 745 episodes of a podcast on a video platform where only a fraction of them actually have video. So that can absolutely crush your YouTube, and that might be a reason why, just a negligible percentage of people actually consumed it. And the reason I say that is because it's a freaking great episode. It's a great freaking episode. Okay, so barring all the other mistakes and everything like that, 3 comments from 328 views for 32,000 subscribers? Not sure. So last thing we'll do is go to Amy's page. Obviously super clean. Amy knows what the hell's going on. She's fantastic. Click on podcast. All this, some of this stuff was not functional days ago when I audited, so good for them. But this is all pretty clean. Nothing crazy here. One thing I did want to point out, however, is what listeners are saying. This was actually static before, and it's not static anymore. It's scrolling, which is good. They're also kind of showing older reviews. So obviously this, at the time of recording this is about a year old, Endless Inspo. But what happens when you click on view more reviews is what I wanted to highlight. So you click on it just out of interest, and maybe no one does this, but this is more if you're a host. One not great review, another not great review. That's 2 out of the last 6. There's 9, so 2 out of the last 9. And here's a bad one, 3 out of the last 12, so 25%. Okay, another one down here. Are you gaming the system? So the reason I point that out is because even though people as seasoned as Jasmine and Amy are, and they probably have super thick skin, it is important to read the negative reviews and what detracts from the listener experience. And you might say to yourself, oh, it's not ideal listeners. They are ideal listeners because they took the time to actually write something, and they are talking about ads, they're talking about affiliate marketing, they're talking about multiple things. So all I'm saying is people care, and you might not care as a host, but any feedback you could get is something where you could learn from, and it might be the usual complaints or whatever it may be, but obviously it's important to know. Overall, aside from the disparity on YouTube, which is important because it is the place for discoverability for podcasts, it's a great podcast. I don't need to listen to other episodes. My wife talks about it all the time. I definitely respect Amy Porterfield a lot. Jasmine Star just spent some time with my podcast client and my mentor, Chris Doe, and he said it was just a fantastic experience. So this is just an objective audit on areas of opportunity, but more importantly, I just thought it'd be a value add for you to see what it's like when I'm looking for certain things in an episode, especially if you're going to take so much time and effort to be, producing content, making content. Even more so if it's video content. So hopefully this was a value add for you. I have an entire playlist called How to Start a Podcast that you could check out for other videos that give you tactical advice, and I will continue to be doing more audits. And if there's any episode you want me to audit, let me know.